Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City of Bettendorf Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Monday, June 1st, 2026. It's 5 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us. We will begin with 3 consent agenda items, 2 of which you have, Mr. Hunt. So let's start with consent item G, a site development plan, for a proposed Lot 1 FG80 Holdings 8th edition. Our Director of Community Development, Mr. Mark Hunt, you have the floor. Thank you.
Your Honor, thank you. Council, I have a couple cases to go through with you relatively quickly because we have a big agenda tonight. So you've seen this before in other settings, Story Point Senior Living Development. Just to orient you a little bit, it's north of the new sports building at the TBK Sports Complex area. North of the Iron T and then north of the building behind Iron T would be the area highlighted in aqua or blue there. Their applicants are O'Brien Construction, Focus Real Estate Development, Middle Road and Forest Grove LLC. Sorry about the feedback. It is a site development plan for a senior living development. There are some associated replats in the packet. I'm not going to go through the details of all of those. They're fairly pedestrian. Located again north of the Iron T. The development would include 89 units for assisted living and memory care, and then 10 independent living units divided into cottages for a total of 39. Our future land use map and zoning map are consistent with each other, and the use is allowed. So we have no problem with alignment with the plan, either from a future land use standpoint or a zoning standpoint. Give you a little bit of an overview here. If you locate, this is the big sports complex. This is the area we're talking about in question. So you have a larger complex for the assisted living and memory care unit and the individual cottages here. Some other development that we've talked about in the past are located just to the east of it as well. Again, 89 units. Parking was looked at. We have 175 total spaces of off-street parking. We've got 4 ADA spaces as required. Stormwater detention is provided here. And sidewalks and walking trails will connect. We actually have another slide I'll show you that shows the some additional connections we've made, even though it's not necessarily part of the development, which I want to highlight. But we will have sidewalks and trails connecting this to our other network, especially our overhead trail, the new bridge. This is all internal drives, so you're not looking at any right-of-way here. This will all be internal drive lanes, so not city-owned, not city-maintained. The main access point would be off this cul-de-sac. So you'd come off the right-of-way, navigate through the drive lanes, and then come off the cul-de-sac into the location. You will have entries here as well, and a fire service entry if you needed to go through the through and around the storage units if necessary. But the main use entry will be off this cul-de-sac. Want to point out to you that the lot just to the south of it will have a sidewalk built by the developer at the developer's expense to provide that additional connectivity so that when we do have our overhead trail, you can come off that trail and go into this facility. In fact, that was a real attraction for the builder of this facility, both for their residents and their employees. It's really well landscaped. A lot of abundance of not just as trees required by ordinance, but also other plantings that really don't count in ordinance, but also do have beautification. So you'll have some berming and plantings here. 89 tree factors total, but with the other landscaping that's done, it's landscaped really well. I think you've seen these elevations before. I would note there is no water feature in front. That's just some artistic license that somebody took somewhere. So no water feature in front, but the rest of the elevations are correct. And then here's your cottages. Again, they'll be just like independent living homes, parking in the garage, parking in the driveway as well, and no assistance in these facilities at all. We have a positive staff report that's in your packet. We also took this to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They did recommend approval on May 20th, 2026. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mark on consent G? We'll go Frank, then Jerry, then, and Nick.
Is there any underground parking in any of these buildings?
Underground parking, no. There is covered parking in the The garages, but no underground parking.
Okay, thank you.
Jerry?
I noticed there's some sidewalks. Do they meet our 5-foot standard?
Yeah, there'll be 5-foot sidewalks, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Nick?
Thank you, Your Honor. Two questions. To the north there, I saw like where all the landscaping was. Is that a berm that'll separate that from 80?
Yeah, it's bermed a little bit there, yeah.
Okay,
Built up.
do we have any issues with the berm that they're proposing? Are we, they're asking for any, height changes because they're backing up to the interstate?
No, they haven't asked for that, and honestly, it's gonna be a private berm that they're gonna maintain, so not in our right of ways. I don't really have
Got it,
a
okay,
huge concern there.
very good. And then, are they planning on phasing this project? I mean, or is it gonna be all sort of go one foul swoop?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would have to check with them to know exactly how they wanna build it out. I don't know, but I can follow up with them and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Greg?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just want to verify we are not going to be providing garbage collection to the cottages?
That's correct.
And then the cottages, could you tell me the square foot for the cottages? They're 2-car garages, and it looked like 1,400 square foot total. I was just wondering what the livable space was for these.
Without doing a bunch of math live, I don't know the exact square foot of the cottages. I can find out and get back to you unless Taylor, phone a friend.
I'm
Taylor,
sure,
do you know?
I'm sure it complies. I was just curious.
I believe on the site plan, there is some, they're roughly 1,400 square feet total, but they are around 8 or 750 square feet of living space.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. I'd like to entertain a motion that this remain on tomorrow night's agenda as consent item G.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll take it up on consent tomorrow night. Consent item H. Mr. Hunt.
Mayor, council, thank you. Another site development plan at 870 40th Avenue. This is the location of Terracon, a business you might be familiar with. Roughly a site development plan for a 4,144 square foot building addition and an approximate 9,900 square foot parking lot. Lots 2 and 3 of Boyd Russell First Edition is the actual location. Again, we have good alignment with our future land use map and our current zoning, so no disagreement there, and the use is allowed. I would point out, just for background, that the original site development plan back in 2000 did include a build-out, actually a little bit larger than what's being proposed here. So in some ways, we're running this as a site development plan, but it was maybe tacitly approved 26 years ago. We wanted to bring it back to you for your approval again in earnest. So here's what the new plan looks like. Existing building is the larger section here, and the new build-out right here. Again, about 4,144 square feet. Existing structure is a little over 11,000 or almost 12,000 square feet. We did have a Board of Adjustment ruling that allowed the expansion of parking into the front yard setback. Currently zoning has a really large front yard setback for this area. I'll tell you, if you drive around, that has been used up in lots of other locations. They hadn't, so they did go to the Board of Adjustment and get permission for that front yard parking. Existing sidewalks will remain, but they are going to remain as built. They're probably under the old standard. Just for your information, we're having 6 new workstations, 5 offices, 8 cubicles. Terracon is an engineering firm. They do some testing of materials as well, and that's what this will facilitate. Here's the elevation. It's pretty much going to match the building that you know and have seen there before. Landscaping on this one, not a lot to see here. 12 overstory trees were approved as existing trees that were in excess of the original site plan. So they've done some plantings in back or had some volunteer trees. I'm not sure how those came up, but they were able to count several of them as existing. 7 additional tree factors already existed. They did take out some problem ash trees out of the right of way, so we're actually losing some trees that were going to be a problem one way or another for us, and replacing them with trees that hopefully are disease resistant. So those 12 new tree factors and 24 tree factors to the north offset anything that would have been additionally required. So we're 19 over, actually, if you count what they have on site plus what they're going to plant. Again, we did have Board of Adjustment approval for the parking variance. You have a positive staff report in your packet, and Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval on May 20th. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions for Mark? Nick?
I guess one thing that comes to mind, with the expansion of the parking, do we anticipate, or let me rephrase it, what is the anticipated increase of vehicle travel back there? Is it something that we should be concerned about or thinking about?
There are probably some new employees, but
Okay.
it's not a customer visit location. It's employees come in, do work, leave in corporate vehicles. So not a huge amount of customer traffic. There will be some additional employees because there is an expansion, obviously. Filling those cubicles and spots we talked about, but it's not like a daily traffic. So I don't have a huge concern about the traffic, to be honest with you, but there will be some amount more.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. It's nice to see business expansion. So,
Go. All right, let's entertain a motion to, yeah, go ahead, Connor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mark, do we foresee any possible issues with allowing the variance for parking at this site with some of the neighbors if they'd requested the same thing? Do you see any impact in the future from that?
Across the street, they have the same parking alignment as was just requested, so I don't see that.
Okay.
There were no complaints brought to the Board of Adjustment, and they would have had a chance to protest then, and that didn't occur.
Thank you.
All right, let's entertain a motion that this remain on tomorrow night's agenda as consent item H.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll take it up tomorrow on consent. Consent item J, for this we have a team. Thank you all for being here. For the approval of the memorandum of understanding with our United Way partners, City of Davenport, Scott County, Davenport Community School District, for the Coordinated Assessment Program. And for that, we welcome the CEO of Family Resources, Nicole Durbin, City Police Chief Doug Scott, City Administrator Decker Plain, and T. LaShore is here as well. T, thanks for being here. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you for having me,
You
sir.
have the floor. Go ahead and tell us what you want us to know.
Your Honor, I think I'm going to tee it up and then hand it off to T, literally.
T,
Thank you.
you've known him for years. He can't help himself. It's all you, but he'll set you up.
All right.
Well, during budget discussions, the council remembers that we had placed $80,000 into this program for 2 years, 80 each year. This is the program that started approximately 5 years ago. Just to refresh the council, you had asked if the schools were involved in those conversations, and they were on a cursory level back then. We did have the opportunity to bring the superintendents in and visit with them, as you had requested, and talk about both their involvement, support, and hopefully monetary support. And so we had that meeting. I think it was very productive. And the memorandum was then created after that. And T and Nicole will kind of talk about where we're at and where we're going. So
Fantastic. Thank you both for
thank you,
being
T.
here.
So thank you for having us today. I serve as the Director of Community Violence and Family Resources. And in that role, one of the programs that I oversee is the Coordinated Assessment Program. And so I'd like to just give you a little bit of information about the program. And we appreciate your time, your interest, and your commitment to supporting the efforts to strengthen our community and families. There we go. So let me take a moment to introduce our team. We currently have a staff of 8 dedicated individuals, including myself as the program director, Hannah Ellis as the CAP supervisor, and then we have 6 coordinators. Each member of our team plays a vital role in ensuring that youth and families we serve receive the highest level of support, guidance, and connection to resources, Through meaningful conversations during our initial screening and our intake process, we identify both our strengths and needs of the family. Comprehensive assessments further help to uncover some of the unidentified issues that may be contributing to unwanted behaviors or challenges youth may be displaying or experiencing. And so our goal is to offer consistent support, guidance, and connection to both youth and their families. So the goal of CAP program is simple: supporting youth and their families as we achieve that through the power of connection. So connecting youth and families to positive and supportive community resources that we meet their physical, mental, and behavioral needs to support health, happiness, and ongoing overall success. So building strong, meaningful relationships is at the heart of the work that we do. As we establish trust with the youth and their families, we serve, it becomes easier for them to accept and engage in the support that we offer, whether that is physical, mental, emotional, or behavioral. These connections create a foundation where families are seen, heard, and supported, ultimately leading to an improved well-being, greater stability, and long-term success. And most importantly, it's free. So we provide comprehensive services. So as we talk about trauma-informed care, that is the foundation of the coordinated assessment program. And then as we move to evidence-based assessments, we focus on individual needs that are grounded in best practices. Collaborative care management, case management means accountability both for internally and externally for families. Every step of that process is infused with procedures to ensure ongoing improvement. And lastly, our CAP Advisory Council. We collect data and outcome reports that are then shared with our advisory council, consisting of youth and families with lived experiences. So how can I get access? Where do referrals come from, and how do families find us? And just as important, why might we receive a referral? So referrals to CAP program come from a variety of trusted sources within the community, including internally in family resources programs, school districts throughout Scott County, healthcare systems, law enforcement and juvenile detention centers, Department of Health and Human Services, other community agencies serving youth and families, word of mouth, including client to client, community outreach efforts such as door to door or our outreach engagements as we do those in the community or local events, and self-referrals through our website at capqc.org, capqc.org. Families are typically referred to us when there's a concern related to youth, their well-being, or behavioral challenges that they're experiencing. Our goal is to step in early and to provide support, connect to families, and connect the families to their services that they need in order to succeed. Families can also connect with us directly on our website, which is easy to navigate and designed to help them quickly access services and information that we offer. This is what our referral page looks like. It's fairly simply to navigate. Asks a few questions, not very long, but gives us enough information to be able to connect to those families directly. The families we serve understand their lives better than anyone. Our goal is to support them in recognizing and building on their existing strengths, capacities, and resources in order to build a foundation for meaningful and lasting change. Since the pilot of CAP program, we have experienced both strong engagement and identifiable barriers. In response, our care coordinators are committed to meeting each family member where they are, whether that's in their homes, at the child's school, or in a safe community setting. By approaching families with this understanding that they are the expert of their own lives, we create a space for them to feel empowered, respected, and in control of their journey. Rather imposing our thoughts and wants in their lives, we allow them to be the experts. Instead, we focus on providing support, resources, and partnership in order to strengthen trust and help families stay connected to services up until a successful discharge. And our authentic family engagement includes client-led services, meeting clients where they are, support versus expertise, empowering families and putting them in control of their lives. And we also have awareness months that we also observe in order to make sure that each of the survivors or families that we serve are celebrated or honored. Intentional and meaningful care plans. An important part of engagement is building care plans together. So as a core part of the philosophy in empowering families, rather doing things for them, this means ensuring that both youth and families are an active participant in what their care plans look like. We intentionally create a space for youth to share their goals, voice their perspectives, and explore what it will take for them to achieve success. Our intake and assessment process is designed to be conversational, helping us identify those needs while also building rapport and laying that foundation for a strong, trusting relationship. While these assessments are not diagnostic, They provide a valuable starting point for developing realistic and attainable goals. Some of the assessments we utilize to guide this process are the life events checklist, the pediatric symptom checklist, the screen for child anxiety-related disorders, screening checklist from 0 to 5, our strengths and difficulties questionnaire, Massachusetts youth screening instrument, and our depression screening tool. These tools help us better understand each youth's experience and challenges, allowing us to connect with them to the most important and appropriate supports while keeping the focus on their strengths and their goals. We also facilitate peer support groups for both boys and girls using our training through the One Circle model. The One Circle model is a structured, strengths-based approach that creates a safe and consistent space for youth to connect and grow. Each session follows a predictable format, beginning with an opening circle, where participants check in and establish a respectful, supportive environment. This is followed by guided activities and discussions that focus on building skills such as emotional awareness, healthy relationships, and decision-making while encouraging youth to share their experiences and learn from one another. Sessions conclude with a closing circle that allows participants to reflect, share takeaways, and leave feeling supported. This consistent structure helps build trust, encourages participation, and empowers youth by centering their voice and fostering meaningful peer connections. These groups provide a safe and supportive space where youth can connect with one another and share their experiences. Through structured activities, this builds a stronger sense of belonging with one another. Peer support groups play an important role in helping youth feel understood, supported, and empowered as they navigate their personal challenges and identified needs.
All right, so in fiscal year 2025, so for our organization, our fiscal year starts on July 1 and ends on June 30th. We have served 221 youth and families. 80% of those youth served made progress and showed behavior improvement, which is outstanding. Out of the youth that had an incident where they received a type of suspension at school, once they entered our services, 94% did not have another incident of suspension. So that is one of the big goals that we have in working with these youth. If they stay in school, they typically don't make bad decisions after school and get in trouble. And then 77% of families stayed engaged, which reflects youth and families and services. So I know Decker talked a little bit about, 5 years ago, the funding. I want to remind everybody when this program was originally brought to Scott County, that's when we had a lot of youth car thefts. And this was one of the tools in the toolbox of the continuum of services that our community as a whole put together to try and address this. So we were really charged with getting to youth before they entered the system. So our target age to engage youth is around 11. Because we know after 11, they're typically engaged with, unfortunately, law enforcement, or juvenile court services, or our YJRC. So we started the CAP in fall of 2021, and the number of youth we've had referred since the initial beginning is over 1,700. We've completed over 1,100 assessments. Every kid that's referred doesn't necessarily come in for services. Every kid that's referred, maybe their parents don't get back to us, so that explains a bit of the discrepancies there. And the number of referrals made to both internal and external resource specialists and agency programs, 1,359 is the total. 544 were internal and 815 are external. That was an important data point that our CAP Advisory Council wanted us to track to make sure it wasn't just Family Resources providing services, that we were really engaged with all the other community partners. So since its inception, like I said, over 1,700, but here is a bit more in the weeds details. So I know it's important for you all to understand how many of your youth in Bettendorf have been a part of our CAP program, so 282. There's the age breakdown as well as gender, and then our highest school utilization. Okay, this is more specific to Bettendorf. There you go. So 282 cases. There's the breakdown of the schools, the age group, and the gender. You can read. I'm not going to go into great details there and bore you with that. Want to go to the next one? And then what we are working on starting July 1, and again, back to the inception of the CAP, there was a group, and we weren't a part of it because we just responded to the RFP that United Way put out, but I think two chiefs, not two chiefs for you, but two chiefs of Davenport ago, went out to Colorado to see the juvenile assessment center out there in Aurora, and there was a community side and a law enforcement side. And so what we are getting ready to stand up July 1 is the law enforcement side, where when your law enforcement officers pick up a youth who needs our services or who they would potentially detain down here and take up a lot of their precious time, they can bring them to the YJRC. Maybe they're not going to be detained there. We can come in and respond. We have an on-call response system. We will work with the youth. We will try and get a hold of a family or a responsible adult, because sometimes, I mean, if you guys could get a hold of family, it'd be lickety-split, but that's not always the case. So it allows your law enforcement officers to get back out and do their job while we're starting to engage with the family and the child and hopefully make some meaningful connections so that we can offer them services. So that's the part that we're getting ready to stand up. It took us a little longer than we wanted to because the YGRC wasn't ready when we wanted to start the building's ready, but all the stuff on the inside wasn't quite ready for us to start last summer. So that's why it's taken a little bit longer. But the group that went out to Aurora told us, if you're gonna do this in your community, start with the community side first and then the law enforcement side. So we've really taken guidance from them who, they know what they're doing. They've been doing out there for quite a while.
So I have a success story for you. A youth was referred to CAP struggling with frequent verbal and physical aggression at school, creating challenges not only in the classroom but also at home. The behaviors impacted relationships with family members, making daily routines difficult for everyone involved. Through CAP's care coordination, the youth was connected to therapy and behavioral services tailored to their needs. At the same time, their mother was provided with access to support groups, giving her a space to learn, share, and build tools to better support her child and family. Over time, these combined supports began to make a meaningful difference. The youth started developing skills to regulate emotions and de-escalate during moments of frustration. As their skills strengthened, both at school and at home, their behaviors became more manageable. The impact has been significant. Interactions between the youth, their siblings, and their mother have improved dramatically, creating a more positive and stable home environment. With these supports in place, this family has made great progress towards healthier communication, stronger relationships, and long-term success. Thank you.
What questions do you have?
Thank you, Nicole and T. How about some questions?
Anybody have a question?
Great success.
Thank you.
Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I'm a little bit confused. Last budget session, when we talked about it in the budget, I was under the impression that there were a lot of kids at the Bettendorf High School or Bettendorf schools, not necessarily the high school, Bettendorf schools that were involved. And yet, when I read the council letter, it said the schools, Bettendorf schools and I guess North Scott School aren't participating because their usage of the program is minimal. I'm just confused here.
So when the program was conceived, the schools, none of them were asked to participate. That didn't happen until actually you asked the question about should the schools, they're participating, they're not paying. So the question was, are they gonna pay? Will they kick in? That was the point of the meeting. Davenport Schools, which is the major user, agreed to kick in this year. All three of them said they would go back and look and talk to their boards. But as you know, Brian Strews is retired or retiring.
Yep.
Joe Studding is gonna retire. And Michelle said she would take it back to her board and discuss what that possibility exists going forward. But knowing that we had to start with the funding July 1, we grabbed the $50,000 from Davenport Schools and reallocated so that our amount drops down to 71. We're still going to be in those conversations with the other school districts about moving forward with some sort of contribution. But the bigger deal, I think, for us was A, solidify the funding starting July 1, and then secondly, if by chance we think it's successful in the next 2 years and want to carry forward, because the John Deere Foundation money will not go forward after those 2 years, the schools are going to have to come in some form to offset, or we're going to have to go up, or we're all going to have to decide we don't have any money. So this is a 2-year period that I think we're going to be living in, trying to get participation and support while we move forward. And to Nicole's point, we finally have the law enforcement side fully stood up now and ready to go. So there should be more results on the law enforcement side, I think, that will be helpful in our analysis as we go forward.
Yeah, and I see that the real answer is going to come when we get feedback from the chief. Do we see less involvement of the police department, less problems, and therefore the program's a success? Hopefully it is.
Other questions? Go ahead, Chief, if you'd like to.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I think we're in this, I'm coming into this kind of midstream. We did our 5 years. We got the community side stood up. The schools are very receptive of that. And I think we're all really interested, as Nicole said, the Youth Juvenile Detention Center is what was having some building issues that had delayed that. So we didn't really get a chance over the last year to see what that was. It was unfortunate, but here we are today. And I think once that gets going, we're gonna all be able to, us, Davenport, Scott County, all the rural agencies are all gonna be able to take advantage of that and try to get more services to the kids, because we all believe that if you get them in young enough, you keep them out of the system. I think that's what we really want as a community. And all these are cross streams anyways, maybe a kid from a different city comes into our city, commits a crime, we still want them to get the services so they don't commit future crimes. So that's where we kind of tie all that back together.
And I don't have the latest data, but car thefts are down, juvenile car thefts, which was really one of the biggest things that kind of kickstarted this. Also, the youth gun violence as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Connor?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. On slide 14 for the Bettendorf community impact statistics, we had 282 cases. 53 of those came from referral sources. Where did the other 229 come, just to understand how people are finding these services in our community or getting put to them?
So what we did was, some of those could be self-referrals. Some of them can be, what I did was pull like what we wanted from the schools. We wanted to show the schools and other agencies. So they can self-refer. They also can, if we go into a school and that kid is displaying some challenges, we don't necessarily need a referral. We can enroll that kid and do an initial screening and take that kid into services on our own without having a referral source.
So your question is, what were the other referral sources outside?
Yeah, how did the other 229
district,
people
high
that were
school,
impacted from a
middle
Bettendorf
school,
perspective, how did they get to the services? Just to make sure we're getting them there the best way, since
Yeah, we
only
can-
53 of them were.
Find out that
I can,
information
yep,
for you.
I can for sure give you that.
Curious, just making sure if we're doing this, we're giving Doug all the tools we can.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you both very much
Yeah.
for taking time out of your
Thank
evening.
you.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I'd like to entertain a motion that this remain on tomorrow night's agenda as consent item J.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, how about taking a look at the remaining consent agenda items? Anything there that a council member would like to discuss at this time? All right, let me entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? We'll take up all items on consent tomorrow evening. We did remove one. That's an obvious one. Items to appear, including the one we moved from consent K. Any council member want to be heard on any of those items? All right. Let's move to our discussion, and then we can ask if you guys want anything added. And I know Jerry's got a question for Parks. So let's move to our discussion about the potential annexation of 450 acres east of Criswell. For that, we welcome our Community Development Director, Mark Hunt. Taylor Bestwick is also here. I know that many folks will jump in on this discussion, and I think we'd encourage council as we go through the discussion to ask any questions that you have. In fact, if you have some position on some part of this, hey, this sounds like a good idea here, but I'm worried about this, let's have that discussion so that you can be ready and willing to kind of direct staff after our discussion. So for that, I'll leave it to you guys to get started. Decker, Chris, Jeff, Jason, Brent will all jump in, as will probably the chiefs at one point in time or another.
Absolutely. Mayor, well, thank you for that introduction. I will also mention that we do have consultants from Baker Tilly and Gruen & Gruen Associates online via Teams. They will be able to jump in here in a few seconds if you have questions for them. If we don't have questions for them at some point, I think we should probably
Let 'em
have
go.
them log off, and then they can, find Bill Bauer somewhere else, perhaps. Taylor's gonna run some slides for me. This is really meant to be more interactive and discussion. So if you saw the slides for the weekend, they're built more like a Q&A as opposed to a normal presentation style. So we're gonna do a little bit of the presentation style, but hopefully it's evolves or moves into a Q&A type thing. So, but for those watching at home, maybe you need a recap, we'll do a quick recap. That'll be a couple slides. We'll bring in our consultants for any questions that you might have, because you've had those studies for a while now. You want to ask those questions directly, we can get those out of the way, and then we'll move into a discussion. I think you saw kind of how we built out those slides with some larger philosophical type questions at the top, a little bit of context, and then follow-up questions afterwards. Those are really for you to help pepper the conversation, if you will. So without further ado, let's do a quick recap. Just the area in question, right? We're talking Forest Grove Road, Criswell, Wells Ferry, kind of a triangular area, 400 some odd acres, depending on how much we actually bring in annexation applications. I'm gonna say 450 to 420. Non-developed areas, so we're not talking about a farmhouse or two, but other than that, we're not talking about neighborhoods that are existing outside in the county. This is all farm ground for the most part. And a voluntary annexation scenario. So we're looking at a minimum 80-20, if not 100% voluntary annexation. We did do a kind of a rough estimate at development. This is, really from our own minds based on the patterns we've seen in Bettendorf before. A little over 500 units of residential development, a mixture, mostly single-family homes, but some townhome styles as well. A little bit of commercial type development at the edges would kind of fit that normal Bettendorf pattern. And that's what it might look like on the screen in front of you there. Any questions about the recap, what we're looking at, where we're going here? I think there would be. Let's go ahead. We have Baker Tilly on the line and Gruen & Gruen, so Aaron Gruen and Deborah Jeans, I believe, are both on the call. I'm not as familiar with the Baker Tilly staff people as well.
If it's Mitchell Eschweiler is on from Baker Tilly.
And Mitchell Eschweiler from Baker Tilly. You've had those studies. We're going to reference them here a few times today, but I know there might be questions. If you wanted to ask those to the authors, now is your time, either on the sewer rate study or the Gruen & Gruen fiscal impact study. Remember, the sewer rate study looked at how, a couple of things, but for this project, how the sewer rates might be designed, or a sewer district might be designed in particular. And then Gruen & Gruen looked really mainly at general funds, a little bit public works dollars, and how those would be impacted from an annexation of this area.
Anybody have questions for Gruen & Gruen or Baker Tilly?
Not yet.
Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. In the Gruen & Gruen analysis of the homes that are anticipated to be built, roughly $970,000 homes, what was the basis for this as the price point for these homes? And how does it affect the model if these come in 20 to 30% lower than this model projected?
Yeah, so I can answer part of that, and I'll invite Aaron to jump in at any point. So staff gave our best estimate, knowing the developers that are involved, knowing the land that's involved, and knowing the zoning code as well, to say what this would pencil out at. Certainly, if you start building smaller homes or maybe less valuable homes, you might then build more homes, so your total valuations might stay the same. You have more smaller houses, but it total out the same, versus big houses, less houses, but still same total. Aaron, did I miss anything? You might be muted.
No, I don't think you missed anything. And if you, just to simply assumed it was 30% less, the main item would be the property taxes. So if you just simplistically reduce property tax by 30%, that would be what the answer would be. And right now, just looking at the summary tables, there's more than a 30% difference in revenue over costs. So I don't think if we all make mistakes and none of us get it right to the penny, but I think there's enough excess here that it would not change the overall finding that revenues over time are going to be more than costs, public service costs over time.
Thank you.
Mark, we're talking about this thing being like a 10-year, pie in the sky, 20-year type build out. With the way prices are going now, can you even, I mean, I don't know that you can build a house on a half-acre lot in Bettendorf for $650 to $7 right now.
That's absolutely true. I mean, our villas, our split down the middle, 2-home villas, duplex, whatever you want to call them, those are $500,000 on each side.
Or more.
For a fairly modest one.
Yeah.
So you're coming into the market now on new ground, in new build, $500,000 is kind of the entry point. Townhouses and apartments, that's different, but at least at even a villa, so a duplex, if you will, I think 500,000 new build, new ground is the floor right now.
Other thoughts? Yeah, Greg?
Following up on what Councilmember Pelzinski just asked, the number of homes and the financial cost of development of those homes, is that something we have come up with, or is that something the developer has provided to the consultant?
It would be a mixture, so we had to provide them inputs for them to model with. So we had to give them what our general revenues are based off of.
No. The breakdown of houses is X number of houses at $1 million, Y number of houses at 800,000. Is that information that was provided by the proposed developer of this property, or is this provided by us?
Yeah, again, a mixture. So we've worked with developers to see, asking them, I think we met with 6 or 7 of them, if you built in this area, what would you build? Gave us their perspective on that, and then we kind of drew it up and modeled it, and then gave it to Gruen and Gruen to look at.
Other thoughts for our experts on the line? Greg?
Thank you, Your Honor. On the money side of it, for the bonds that we would have to issue, as I read the assumptions, the bonds are not only issued to cover the expenditure, but are also issued to cover increases in reserves and increases in debt service ratios. I want to verify that that's correct.
Jason, you want to tackle that and then talk with our friends at Baker Tilly?
Yeah, if Mitchell wants to chime in, please do so. Don't believe that's how it was structured. They did offer an option where we could do some kind of or revenue anticipation notes, which I don't think we would probably proceed with that type of borrowing. It would be SRF revenue notes, very similar to what we just did with the Spencer Creek project in my mind.
So there's no policy that would say if we were to borrow $15 million, we would have to increase our reserves to provide an additional year of debt coverage, for instance.
If we needed to do that, you would do so through the rate. And I think Mitch can talk to that a little bit about that debt service ratio of income to
I guess
to
I'm
debt
not
expenditures.
making myself clear. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I don't understand the process, and I'm having trouble verbalizing my question. If we are anticipating to issue $15 million for sewers, we would expect to pay $15 million for sewers plus interest on the debt, wherever we finance it from, whatever the interest is, we got to pay it. Are there additional sums that we would need to borrow above and beyond those two factors, either pursuant the debt notes that we sign in order to place the money, or pursuant council policy that would talk about the amount of reserves necessary in comparison to the amount of debt that's carried in that utility?
No, I don't believe there would be additional borrowing.
Okay, that's great. That's what I wanted to know. Also on the money. Now jumps over to the other report. I did not understand some of the assumptions that were made, and I'm hoping you just clarify that for me. The new money that comes on each year is shown in the chart. Is what's shown in the chart also reflective of the 2% growth each year that will be allowed?
The chart does not look at the 2% growth. It looks at just the growth in the property tax from the new houses coming on. It's
So
not modeling
It's
the
only
cap.
the new money. The expense side of it, I'm sorry, you got something else? It's the new houses coming online, it's the new money.
Yeah, that's the new money. I don't think, they didn't, when the study was done, the new tax law wasn't done. So there's a section of the study that talks about looking at the new tax law. You can kind of ignore that because that law didn't get passed, right? That, whatever page that was. So
But we should assume that there'll be 2% growth on all of the houses that are built in the
Yes,
successive
yeah,
years.
that would be true. right?
We didn't assume for property tax increase, right?
Yeah.
Were
and-
expensed.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
go ahead. Whoever is talking.
I just said, we didn't assume, for the purpose of this analysis, we didn't assume that increase. So this is, it would
It's
be,
in constant dollars.
it's in constant dollars. In the real world, it would go up.
Okay. And how about on the other side of that question? The expenses that you've calculated for providing service. Over the course of the 20 years, were there increases built into those projected costs? Or are those costs constant as well?
Other than the initial years when costs are going up as services are being added or capital being added, we did not inflate. And one reason we didn't inflate is that it's standard practice to exclude guesstimates about future inflation in order to keep the analysis focused on the actual residential development's true effects. So using constant dollars allows us to isolate the effect of new development in terms of changes in revenues and expenses without confounding those impacts with broader economic activity or changes. And inflation in particular is very difficult to predict. It can be, it's 4% now. It was 2% not too long ago. The long-term goal is 2%. But any predictions we would make on inflation are likely to be wrong and essentially significantly distort the costs or the revenues over time. And if we also are going to do that, then we should be adjusting for the same inflation assumptions all of Bettendorf's budgets over the next number of years. So we think it's much easier for most of us to understand how costs are today than incorporate costs adjusted for inflation 10 or 20 years from now. And by keeping it constant, it makes it much easier to compare to other studies or other projects. So that's a long-winded answer for we're just showing you what the costs are basically today, and we're not factoring in changes in inflation or changes in costs over time.
During our budget presentation, staff was very concerned that the proposed property tax legislation was going to cap revenues at 2%, when our historical growth in cost to provide services is going up 6%. And that's apparently a number that has been fairly constant over time, or at least that's how I understood it. So as far as this study goes, constant revenue, constant expenditure, you're not dealing with the proposed 2% increase over time, and you're not dealing with the proposed increase in cost over time, whatever that may be, as we get to it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
Anything else for Gruen or Baker Tilly? Nick?
Yeah, thank you, Your
Well,
Honor.
Jerry?
So and sort of on the heels of what Councilmember Jager asked, so the report assumes a 4% bond rate. Currently, I think it's 3.3 or something like that as SRF. If the project doesn't qualify for SRF and we end up going to the market and we have rates that are, as they said today, significantly higher than that, what does that do and how does that change the modeling?
Yeah, so that would be on the sewer rate study side.
Jason?
Yeah, you'd be moving more into a GO or revenue backed bond in the sewer fund still, but sold on the market. You'll recall we just sold bonds in February, and that percentage escapes me at the moment, but I think we ended up at somewhere around 3.5% on those bonds. Revenue bonds would typically cost a little bit more on interest, so you might be still in that 4% range. I don't know if Mitchell has any input on that, but I think 4% was put in with the intent of it being kind of a conservative estimate with some padding in there. Yeah, so I think it would hold.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's accurate. Today, you're probably looking at, if you're looking at a 20-year sewer revenue bond, dependent on your overall credit rating, you're probably looking at low 4s at this point. Now we are hoping, I know the market's hoping that we'll start to see things cooling off. We're currently in an environment where interest rates have ticked up over the last couple of months. So the thought is in the next several months to a year, we'd start to see softening of those interest rates and that rate would come down. And again, that's all assuming that you would not be able to qualify for the SRF program. So that really hoping that you would be able to go through that program and get the lower interest rate than what we're currently assuming in the report.
Tucker, you have?
Your Honor, I would just say this, since we got into the state revolving loan fund, we've not had, nor have I seen any rejections of any projects statewide in the state revolving loan fund, and there seems to be adequate supply. And there's some pretty significant projects throughout the state. So I've not seen any rejections. I don't know if Jason's gotten any insight to that, but my perspective is I see my colleagues talking about the SRF and encouraging other cities to use SRF funding, and I think it's really stable.
I think Brent can speak to it from the engineering side, but we've been reassured from our consulting engineers that this is an eligible project.
Yeah, that's correct. Some of the projects that historically they have not wanted to fund are more prospective type projects, knowing that we do have some immediate property owners. And, if you look at our Spencer Creek project, which was approved, it was even more speculative, quite honestly, compared to the fact that we do have adjacent property owners here that are really looking for it. So McClure, who Jason referenced, our engineering consultants, do this all across the state, and they have no concerns.
Jerry had something, right?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. So for the sewers, the package here talks about a sewer district fee concept, but scenarios 1, 2, and 3 did not address that very well.
I think scenario 3 had a sewer district with a 75% taken on by the district.
But existing users were still going to be required to subsidize it to some extent, if I understood it right.
That's correct. That's accurate. Yeah, we had assumed in the study, and this is scenario 3. So scenario 1 is the baseline without annexation. Scenario 2 is pulling in the additional $15 million cost for the annexation, and we wanted to show what would this look like if we just spread this out over all sewer users for the city. Scenario 3 then carves this out as a special user rate. Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be a special district. You could set it up as more of like a monthly capital improvement charge for the specific process, or you could potentially do it through a sewer district. I think the way you go about doing this, I mean, there's different options. There's different financing options, as Jason was alluding to. Really what we were trying to portray was that going through this process, likely you're not going to want to bear all these costs on your existing customers. Here's what it would look like if you did, but here are some different options that you could consider moving forward, whether that be through the structuring of the financing or setting of special user rates to attempt to pass off some of those costs to the new customer base.
Yes, because that's my concern, that existing customers were already raising their rates. And, you know, for a lot of our residents, affordability of just the cost of living is an issue. And so I'm concerned that we would be further raising their rates to support new construction that doesn't benefit them.
Well, it does. That's why the studies were done. It benefits them a lot because it reduces their taxes. Remember, that's the studies that Grew and Baker Tilly did. It benefits everybody. In the past, we've always done it from the current users, and then when people come on, they start paying their taxes. But I think what the team is looking for is discussion on the concepts, because they have a lot more work to do to kind of drive this forward. And if they're gonna invest that time, energy, and money in doing that work, they want to kind of get a nod from us by the end of this, that, hey, we might look at some different ways to do rates, 75, 25, 50, 50, 25, 75, some other ways that we can run some of this. And our folks at Grew and Baker Tilly are certainly happy to help us do that, but we haven't decided that we're going to pay them yet. We're trying to kind of figure out the concepts. We're going to pay you for your work you've already done. We know that.
And I think what's.
Did you guys? Yeah, please.
Sorry, Your Honor.
No.
I think what's
This
encouraging.
is more of a
that
discussion.
The
Just go right
questions that
ahead.
are coming up, I think some of these we're gonna be able to even analyze more through that quote presentation, which I don't want to be a presentation. So I liked the dialogue, and I think some of these things we can look at more. You'll be able to make your, whether you like the answers or not, you'll be able to make that decision, but those have not escaped us. So the things that I'm hearing come up, I think we're gonna address yet again through staff's analysis in this report. Certainly Grew and Baker Tilly may have some additional information for you, but I wanted to make sure if there were like technical things that staff weren't looking at, because we didn't write the reports, that we asked those. But if it's more the understanding, the philosophy, do we want to grow, do we not want to grow, do we like sharing costs among all users, do we not like that, or how much of that do we like, maybe is more of the right question. We're going to definitely get into that later in this presentation. That's not a presentation.
And I will hold my questions till later.
Okay, that's totally
No,
fine.
but any
Anything else
question
for Baker
anytime.
Tilly
Don't-
or Grew? If something comes up, we can obviously have team
I can
get
go
to
back
it.
and forth.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so you're in charge. If you want to release the hounds, you certainly may.
Yeah, I would say, Baker Tilly, Grew, feel free to log off. I don't know that we
You're
need
certainly
you.
welcome to stay, but
Yeah,
we appreciate your work. But I think we've gotten to a point where we're over with questions for you specifically today. You'll have contact from staff in the future for sure.
And they've already said, email us follow-up questions from
Absolutely.
tonight's meeting, and we'll
Yeah,
answer them.
thanks very much. I'm sure both firms are readily available to answer questions or take ideas and have you bounce ideas off us. We appreciate it, and best of luck in your deliberations.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you as well. Appreciate being able to join virtually, and we are certainly available by email and can address any concerns or questions there are.
Thank you, Mitchell. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, if we can go to the next slide, we've put this together in what I think is a logical order. Think about this as the Q&A document, and you have questions you want answered. We've thought about the questions you've asked us. We've had side conversations here and there. I've tried to capture them all. We have tried to capture them all. We can go 1 through 8 and hit them, or you can dive right in at your will. We can bounce around. We can start going in order and then come out of order if we want to. These are the ones that, from my conversations with you all and in my own mind and my conversations with other staff, that we think are the big meaty questions, right? Some of them are bottom line oriented for sure, but some of them are more philosophical. How do we feel about this? How do we feel about getting bigger as a city geographically and population wise? And is that okay with us? I think staff is positive, right? We think, we've done our analysis, we think this is the way to go. But we want to make sure that you're comfortable and that when you make a vote asking us to process these applications or go to the SRF, that you are making that vote with all the information that you need. And lo and behold, if we discover something tonight that changes our mind, we are eyes, heart wide open. So I would ask the council or the mayor, we want to start at 1, we'll go to 1. If you want to jump right into 4 or 5, let's do that at your will.
I think the first 3 kind of set the table a little bit for the remaining discussion. What do you guys, so that you just get kind of, what have we done in the past? Where are we at now? Why do we consider this? Then you can get us into, hey, financially, and this just doesn't have to be long.
Yeah, so let me just set the stage. Previous annexations, how we've handled them in the past. I would say they've been much more sweeping as far as area. They've really been big chunks separated by decades. Had a big one in the 60s. I'm gonna go back as far as the 60s. Might go prior to the 60s. So we got a big one in the 60s, kind of wrapped around Riverdale. Then we kind of went north. Yeah, throw that map up. And then we kind of went north up to the interstate.
This is your links.
Yeah.
We'll do it this way.
Yep, so the green one, the light green one is that 1962, 1964, whatever the number is, kind of going around Riverdale. That was a pretty big one. That was some already developed area. That was the old Pleasant Valley area. Then we, in the 70s, went north. A lot of anticipation around the interstate system coming on board, and that was really driving that if you look back in the planning documents. And then a few other smaller ones. And then just recently, since then, I'm going to say in the 1990 on, they've been more strategic, smaller.
We've only had,
Smaller
3.
ones. And one of them you were part of, 2025, just north of the Forest Grove Schoolhouse. So that's interesting to me. And I would say land use planning has changed a lot since 1960 to 1990, right? Or to 2026. It was more common back then for cities to take large swaths of land, grab them and hold them, and then hope for development. None of us live by that anymore. No planner worth his salt lives by that methodology anymore. That's not the way we do business. We understand that there's some risk to that. Now, I will say, Bettendorf did darn well in what they did in those previous annexations. But I think this annexation, in contrast to the past, is much more targeted than what we've done in the past. When it comes to the cost of development, how that was figured out, it was a case-by-case basis as best as I can tell. Others in this room have more history than me, but sometimes we shared costs, sometimes we had development agreements. It just kind of depended on the context of the project. But often, the city was the first money in, on our frontier especially. So I put the question out there. I gave you the context, the policy considerations. Those are kind of leading questions you might read through. When I say, does this model still work? I would not advocate for a large thousands and thousands of acre annexation. That would be inappropriate in my opinion. So when I say, does this model still work, I'm talking about the way things were done in the past. What was good or bad about that, I think that's open for debate. So happy to discuss this topic, how things were done in the past. If people have other insight or recollections, good for discussion.
Your Honor?
Yeah.
It seems obviously with the school and the church relocating out to that area, seems like what's going on a little bit north of Forest Grove with some of the windmiller properties and so forth, that this particular thing seems like the natural, maybe final, air quote, final point that we might go to the east, reasonable point. So
at least with
it feels a bit more, although it's on the edge, it feels to me a bit more like infill than it does like a reach. So, because it just feels like what's going on to me, that the school and some of the things that are around it, that this just seems like a natural sort of folding in. And I guess I'd wonder from emergency response, what would happen in terms of an event in this new area what would be likely to happen in terms of fire, sheriff or police, et cetera?
Just, thank you, great question. We service that area now for fire and EMS, so it's not gonna be a big pickup. And if you remember back from goal setting, we talked about slowly adding staff anyway, because we're currently growing out north. I think this would be a great way to offset some of those future costs that we're gonna have anyway.
Explain that a little bit more, Chief. What do you mean offset the cost?
As far as future fire station, future fire personnel.
But the taxes
The
that
tax
come
base-
from the new growth
Yes.
would help offset the cost based on the studies.
Currently, we're getting like 60 3/4 cents per thousand taxable value from Scott County Fire District 1. This way, we'd get the full taxable amount, which I think would, over time, which would help us because we're growing anyway to the north. And if you look at fire station placement, if you put one out on Indiana, kind of where the Wilson Farm is, we're like a 4-minute response time quicker than where we're coming off of Surrey Drive to that furthest point in that quadrant for us. And I can show you that on a map. I know that's hard to explain a little bit, but just running times, and time's very important. Our response times are crucial for this. Is that what you're looking for,
Yeah,
sir?
it is. Maybe you can speak to, again, I don't want to interrupt Chief Scott, but
What's that?
the response times, the stretch of resources and so forth, in your mind, it fits, it also translates into this more natural, expected.
Yep, absolutely it
growth.
does. Yeah, I guess from a law enforcement response, I'd let Chief Scott talk about that, but currently in that quadrant, I think it's 316. We only run 16 calls there right now, you know, but to the east of that, we're up in that 60 range, right? Because it's more developed, because that's what you would about see here as far as call volume. My concern is when Station 4, Surrey Heights, goes out to one of those calls, we have to respond from Station 2, and we're a very extended response time to get out to the Betplex or even out at that area, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We really want to keep that 5 to 6 minute response time. Perfect example is Palmer Hills Golf Course last week. We had another incident out there. Our guys were there very quick. The outcome was very good on that. We started extending those response times, and the outcomes aren't so as good. So
We just threw up on the screens the fire district maps, Chief.
Yeah,
so
we need
they
to go,
can see
yeah.
that.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie.
yeah, that's the area they're talking about, and I think that's 316. So you can see we continue out even to the east a little bit more for Scott County Fire District 1. And that's where that's at. And I can get you detailed maps of those quadrants if you're interested, and I get you response times as well.
So from a police department standpoint, I think our immediate thought on this is that as you develop, it's gonna take years to develop this property. New development, we typically don't have a large call volume that increases just because of that in and of itself from like domestic situations, problems inside the residential area, things of that nature. Is it gonna impact some traffic potentially? Is it going to impact, some needs out to the east that may pull us a little further, but we're at Criswell now. We'll mutual aid with Scott County Sheriff's Department. I think that conversation is not going to be an extremely heavy conversation from the police department standpoint, just because I don't see a substantial need to be in there unless there's a demand that occurs from council to be more present in beats of the city. But under our current model, we're pretty reactionary to whatever's going on in the city, wherever it's going on. We're actively doing patrols 24/7, 365 all over the place. So I don't see a significant increase in a need in that space right out of the gate because you move in that direction.
Your Honor, this might almost be a double head scratcher on this one. So.
Hey, that's why we do those personality inventories. We know each other.
But and again, just trying to piece this together, it seems like when we talked at almost every goal-setting session that annexation would go to the north and maybe to the west, that somehow now, putting this under the microscope, it looks a little bit more manageable, a little bit more natural, right? I mean, frank, we used annexation almost like a punchline because we thought this thing was on our goal sheet and on our radar for so long, but it seemed maybe too difficult. And a lot of that might have been the lack of infrastructure and the fact that we hadn't punched across the interstate and so forth. But this just, again, I'm trying to piece together some of the financial concerns that, you know, some council members have illustrated. Is this spooky wisdom? Is this something that, you know, again, makes financial sense? And then how do we manage the unexpected or expected strain on resources if they exist? So,
Yeah, I think that's the widest area question to me. And the head scratcher is we do have a lot of ground north of Interstate 80. But if you look at how do you get there and what is there now, that is, even though it's annexed, right? Annexation is not an issue there, right? Even though it's annexed, it's harder to get to, less served, and doesn't have services readily available. This area happens to have Wells Ferry Road, Chris Road, that are good roads that serve it well, Forest Grove Road. So it's got three, it's got north, south, east, west connecting it, so you've got some road connections, and now you've got the service of the school component. Both the parochial school system and the Pleasant Valley school system have facilities already in place less than a mile, and then a piece of ground owned by the school district of Pleasant Valley is also adjacent to the property. So the parochial school system's brand new school is literally adjacent to it. There's ground owned by PV that is adjacent to it, not built upon yet. And then Forest Grove School is less than, Forest Grove School is less than a mile away. That creates an effect, because those are desirable areas, those are desirable services that people want to speculate on that ground and want to use it. We also had, I think, made some assumptions about the sewerability, if I'm making up a word, I apologize, of this area. I didn't go to engineer school. That I think when we actually paid for a study to do it, the sewerability, the gravity north to south, the alignment was better than we thought.
Yeah, yep, I was gonna add to that, Mark. For years, I think since I started here, a $40 million number was always kicked around that we thought being able to serve this area was gonna cost us. And no one had ever actually done a conceptual layout and put numbers to it until about 5 years ago when, Scott, to your point, when annexation was really being discussed. So we hired McClure to do that as part of our citywide study, and that's where we put these numbers. It was about 13 million then. You know, we've obviously had some inflationary increases, but nowhere near that $40 million number. They did a little bit of work on also you'll notice that the area does not include, say, some of those areas further south or further east. That really helps us reduce that pipe size, which ultimately the biggest thing that's going to save us is we can get under Spencer Creek when you start heading south and then west. If we can get under there without having to build a lift station, that's $2 million in savings right there, which is what this design has allowed us to do. And then, to Mark's point, heading north, we just have the sewer there now, but we still need further extensions to start moving north. We've got some immediate areas that we can serve, but it's not a ton. It's still going to require some extensions. We got seal coat roads. Water main has just been stubbed under the interstate as of a few months ago. So still a lot of challenges, electric, gas, everything still needs to be upgraded as you go north.
If I could jump in, I think there's a question of annexation. That is one question, and there's a cost of building sewer. They're related right now because you need sewer in the newly annexed area. But even our existing city, north of 80, you need to build more sewer, right? You still need to build trunk lines. And so how we pay for sewer is a question that we probably want to answer and get comfortable with at your discretion. That is related to, but not the same as annexation. And if we think that we need to be better about paying for these big infrastructure costs, to Jerry's point, so that piece isn't carried by the guy down the road as equally as the guy who gets the new sewer. I'm down for that. I understand that. So maybe we weight that, right? The person who's been on the sewer system may get a little benefit from having more users on the system and more customers that come down to their shop and shop there. Great. But they shouldn't carry equally, I would say, the sewer district model, which is not really part of annexation. You could do that anywhere in the city, might be the way to address our concerns about how do we pay for infrastructure in a way that's fair in a city that's experiencing the fast growth scenario that we're experiencing, right? We are a desirable place to be that creates pressure on us. It creates pressure on you. How do we relieve some of that pressure? Well, we got to build more. If we build more, how do we pay for it? And how do we pay for it fairly? And the sewer district is not only because of annexation. The sewer district can be done. It's an impact fee, guys. It's basically what it is. It can be done in many different ways, right? In many different places. It doesn't have to be part of annexation.
I have one more question, Your Honor.
Yeah, please.
And this may be more philosophy than anything, but is there, in your community development world, how do you account for momentum? So, for example, if a city is like we are, I think, where there's a unprecedented amount of growth out in one particular portion of our town. I mean, we always want to turn our sights back towards, well, are there wards that don't have that type of growth, and do they have needs, et cetera, and so forth. But if there's economic benefits or there's just activity, people want to live there, raise a family, go to the restaurants and so forth. How does momentum, and when is there a point at which it's too much? Hey, we need to slow this growth. That's the philosophical debate, right? But I don't have any expertise in that. So
Yeah, I think you need to be judicious about expanding your borders. It should be a consequential decision that is thought through thoroughly, and we're happy to do that and help you with that decision. Certainly cities that are looking to solve their budgetary problems by growing, that's not what we're proposing here. We're a city with a good budget. We're a city with a sound AAA rating, if I'm not mistaken. Whatever.
Not quite.
We think so.
Try it again.
Just to be clear, I've been in a city that was downgraded twice. Okay, it's a different feeling, man. My first 2 years. So we are a city with a good budget. We're not proposing to solve a budget problem by saying, hey, let's go out and get more land and make money. We're saying we have development pressures on the city. This is a desirable place. We're in a good position. Can we afford this growth? Is it smart? Is it timely? Does it align with our plans? And is it otherwise wise? I think yes, to this context in this location. You could point other areas on the map and I would say no.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead and drive us, Mark.
Yeah, let's do the next one. Existing land inventory. I think a question that would be fair to ask is how much available land is available in the city and what does that number mean? There's a lot of analysis that could be done here that's been done. Taylor's been working on it, I know, behind the scenes. I think Brent helped a lot with this. We know we have around 450, 500 units of approved lots, right? They're lots. But not every lot is the same. A townhouse lot obviously isn't the same as a single-family home lot, but about 450 in that pipeline, in the well, so to speak. But it is not the case in any city that you spend all that inventory down to zero and then go get 450 more units of lots, right? So there's some amount, and I don't know the number scientifically, but there's some amount that needs to be in the system, right? If you think about it from a housing perspective, if you had 0 vacancies in housing, and then you had 500 and you sold 500 and then had 0, that would just send your prices skyrocketing, right? Besides the fact it'd be really hard to locate here. So you need some amount of inventory in the pump, right? To keep that pump primed. You don't want it to go down to 0. That makes it too hard to locate here. It makes it very expensive. You want it to be too much. Our lot in life is we kind of get to decide because we get to expand the borders of the cities if we want to. So we get to decide when it's time to bring more land on. We should be judicious in that. We should only bring an appropriate amount on. Interestingly, we've talked to our developers, and to a person, they have said, bringing more land on does not hurt me, does not hurt my product. It creates pipeline for the higher end developer, for the developer that's more affordable. It lets them sell those units they currently have and then build more units, bring more units on. But none of them are worried about adding to inventory in terms of land to this area, as it might somehow depress their prices or cause them problems. That has not been the response we've heard. What we've heard is they need about 5 years, which is about what we have. They need 5 years in the bucket and working on getting another 5 years. And they kind of work in these 5-year chunks.
remind us how many front doors we have averaged the last few years?
Yep, so. I
100
would say
single family and another 40 or
Yeah,
50.
Just front doors, and if you look at the graph, it's kind of got that circus tent look to it, because what happens is you do about 100 single-family homes every year. And then you'll bump in and you'll bring in a senior living complex, and you'll bump up to 400 or 500, and then you're back down to 100. And then you'll do an apartment complex, you'll bump up that circus tent. So when you see the bumps, that's the big multifamily units coming in. A lot of them have been senior living recently, but there's been some apartments as well. But you're eating up about 100 in the single-family townhome styles every year. And we've been doing that for a long time.
It used to be closer to 150. So we
yes,
kind of
sir.
go 100 to 150, and then if there's some apartments that come on, then next year you probably see another 140.
So you can see the different averages there. I think I averaged them out for you as well on that page. Now, past doesn't predict the future always, but that's been a reliable number for us. I would say that all things being equal, we would expect that trend to continue. What would be interesting and scary is if we weren't able to continue that trend because we didn't have land available to do it. And that's where the existing inventory question starts to really matter. Are we timing this right? You know, we don't want to flood the market, but we don't want to dry the market up either.
I think even now more than ever with the property tax changes, Jason, I mean, I think my 14 years you've been here, and now when you're the department head, you've said growth is what keeps us successful.
It has my whole career. And I think the property tax change only amplifies that. We've talked about the 2% cap, and we'll talk about it, later on in the presentation as well. But remember, that applies only to the general fund, and we were successful in carving new growth out of that cap. So the new growth will be what gives you everything over 2%, at least in the general fund. And we've got I don't want to get to it just yet because we're not to that part of the discussion, but you've got the flexibility of the other levy rates that we can come back to kind of fill the gap. So between those two things, our flexibility in levy rates, which we are in a unique position in the state, plus the value now of new growth being even more valuable to us than it has been in the past, really kind of, I think, makes the case for annexation. Like Mark said, the cost of the sewer is kind of a different discussion. But I think as we look at this, and we've circled it for a long time, and my own opinion has evolved as well, I think this one does make sense, given what we know.
I think some things to think
Mark,
about.
pull your mic
Yeah,
closer
yes,
to you.
sir.
As you lean back, you get quieter.
Yeah, sorry about that. They don't allow me, in the band, they don't allow me to have a microphone, so I'm not used to it. How large of a city do you want to be, right? Certainly there's a cost to infrastructure. And if we were proposing miles and miles of road and miles of pipe, kind of speculatively, that's a bad idea, right? If you're going to build the plant, you want to build the plant just big enough to make the profit off of the product you're making if we were a business. And I think that that's what we're looking at here. Pretty narrow and tailored incremental growth as opposed to a large land grab where you're going to sink yourself with infrastructure costs. But there's no denying this is a bigger town. This isn't the town I grew up in. This isn't a town of 20,000 people. And we are growing. There's only so much we can do about that. And that growth has helped fund us. If we don't annex and we don't add additional lots available to the city, both commercially and residentially, what does that mean? And I think that's a really interesting question. To me, I think you got to really get good at the infill stuff. You gotta be perfect at that. Think about ring suburbs in Chicago where they don't have geography to expand to. They got to keep the downtown up to snuff. They've got to keep those land values really high, and they've got to nail that every time. We have the opportunity on our frontier to add land into the city, and while we want to do really good on the infill projects, we don't have to live and die by them. If we had to live and die just by infill alone, I think it would be tough. It would be hard. We're not that little cute ring suburb with a $6 million mega city right next to us.
Mark, I got one other additional comment, if you don't mind. Taylor, if you could reference the Premiering Bettendorf slide about the population projections as well. I think that contemplates the other side of the scenario. We're talking about the land and the annexation side, but there's also the case for population growth in 3 different scenarios: natural growth, 1% annual growth, 1.5% annual growth. If we were to not annex, it shows our natural growth rate scenario of actually declining over time by population. So that's just another interesting variable to throw in there, in addition to the land expansion. What would we look like in the next 20 years without land growth?
I think one of the things that we talked about a lot is at the staff level is through all those years, our costs will go up. Even if we are a smaller city, our costs will go up. And now you're talking about spreading that cost increase across a smaller pie. So I think what this particular annexation does is allows us to do a couple of things. Spread those known costs that are going up across that larger pie, but also the cost of what it takes to get this done. If we can spread that across a larger pie, more people, it impacts each person less.
Anything else here? You want to move to?
Just want to show you a slide, because if you read the land use plan, it talks about available acres. A lot of that has been chewed up much faster than we anticipated, even 3 years ago when the plan was done. So if you look at this slide, I think the pink areas in the south of 80 are areas that are available for development at the time of the plan. It's interesting how much of that has been consumed. I think we can show you that in a couple other pictures here.
This was three years ago, roughly, the pink area, and then kind of developed land in 2025. That's where there's actually structures, development going on, under construction. But
So
then
we switched the color scheme on you here, guys. So now your undeveloped areas are what, gray?
your undeveloped areas are gray, but when you start to think about, there's an approval for a new Genesis Hospital campus, there's residential developments that are phased, they're under contract. Blackstone is being developed. So you start taking those out of the available inventory for the supply of land, and then you're left with a lot of infill or land that right now is based off of adjacent properties, and their sales is very high for residential. In fact, probably undevelopable for residential given the current market. So that's our current picture, and then everything's either north of 80 or outside our city borders currently.
And that would be more expensive north of 80, am I right? With sewer and,
Your build costs are gonna be, the ground, if you could actually get it, most likely is going to be cheaper. That's one thing I think our developers that are sitting out here can attest to is the ground that is still south of the interstate that's left out there, to Taylor's point, is not available at a price point that can support residential, let alone the fact that you have probably 4, maybe 5 property owners out there that control all of it. And if they're not looking to part with that and not willing to change those prices, that is essentially not available to be developed, at least not residentially. And we came across that just buying right away along Middle Road. The pricing that we saw, and we saw the comps and full appraisals, you're north of $150,000 an acre, which you cannot buy bare ground for that and then go build residential. There's no way.
So the constraints are also, the financial constraints are realistic on this available land, but there's also geographic constraints. Remember, the city's not a flat box, right? So some of these areas that are left are the ones that are be harder to develop, more costly to develop, harder to run infrastructure through. So if you were to overlay actual topography on this map, you may actually shrink down some of that area even more. I think that's an important point to make, because if you read the land use plan, it does sound like there's so much land available in Bettendorf. We've consumed a lot of it in the past, just even 3 or 4 years. Let's hit the next one. Are we still good? Nope. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just one question. Assuming we move forward with something like this, how much time does this buy us into the future for, when does annexation become, you have to go north of 80 or go north of, I think, out to Territory Road, what we've talked about in the past. What does this, again, thumb to the wind, what does this get us in terms of timeline?
I think So our comprehensive plan, when it was built out, I don't have the full map up, but it was, all these land uses have a density of, no, a population associated with it. Obviously, commercial has 0 population, your single family has some, your multifamily has higher. That growth projection, that was the first thing you started with, the update to the comprehensive plan. That was based off of what past growth. So we were looking at annual growth rates, and 2045, it's, I think Jeff had just referenced in the slide, was 56,000. You had to figure out how to fit 56,000 people in the current boundaries. And that was kind of filled out, and that's what the current future land use map looks like. Not to mention add in floodways, greenways, parks, et cetera, all those different things. So this is going to give us more time. You're dealing with 450 acres of mostly single-family residential, so it's gonna be a lower population. We have about 2,000, how many acres north of 80? Think about that. 2,000 within the current city limits, north of Interstate 80. Not all residential. I think you're gonna see a lot of commercial near the interstate, Mill Road and 80, so that's probably not gonna be a huge household producer, but it will give us more time, yeah. That's how kind of the numbers, some of the little background of those numbers and how the projections are thought of.
And again, I think it's just be careful, thinking about as we have this amount, whatever this amount of land or units of housing or units of lots is, and we spend it down to 0 and then we go get more. It doesn't, obviously, we all know that, but it doesn't really work like that. And I think then there's also some philosophical decisions. It's how big do you want to get? You know, are we going to be 60,000? Are we going to be 100,000 someday? Those are questions to be answered. I don't know that it's maybe appropriate for me to say, you know, I like that 50, 60,000. Above that, I get personally nervous. I think that's a different town. We got a lot of room still to get there.
Anything else on this one, or you want to kind of move to the fiscal impacts here? We're talking around it a little bit.
Yeah.
Pull that up.
Yeah, this is an interesting slide. We've talked, as Mayor said, around a little bit with Gruen and Baker Tilly. We know it's about $15 million for the sewer. From a general fund perspective, if you buy into the studies we have almost a double, right? Our expenditures and revenues, our revenues are twice what our expenditures would be over time. Whether you do it in 10 years or 20 years, you still get about a double factor. You get twice as much money as you spend to serve the area. You might spread that over 10 years, you might spread it even thinner over 20 years, but the numbers are still about the same. So the general fiscal impacts, not that they're not interesting, they're just, it kind of is what it is. Either spread it over time or not. When you talk about the sewer study, that's where I think it gets interesting. You know, do you want to, because you could spread this evenly across all sewer users. And annexation really isn't the point here. The cost of the sewer could be fit into our rates. And by the way, we would still have a rate that is less than many of our peers. I don't personally think that's the right way to do it, but mathematically, I'm not wrong, that is available to you. You have a lot of headroom left in that sewer rate. There is a way to do this, again, not necessarily annexation, but just building sewers, to do it where you have that chunk, pick a number, 30, 40, 50% that is absorbed at the beginning of the development by the developer and or new homeowners in that development, where they carry more of that piece. And so they carry a bigger piece of what then gets spread across all users. I think that's attractive whether we do annexation or not.
Important caveat there is, you know, any contribution to the sewer from the development will likely come in as development occurs, which will be over a long period of years. So there's going to be this kind of give and take of a balance somewhere in between that putting all the weight of the sewer on all users versus splitting it between the users and the development. But over the full development cycle, we would anticipate to recoup a big portion of the cost through the development. It just might not happen in year 1, 2, and 3, right? It's going to happen as that takes place. So,
But I think if you model worst case scenario, you build it and nobody comes. happen, right? You could still afford it through your rates and still not have the highest rate in the land. Now, one, I don't advocate for that. Two, I don't think that's how it would go down. But that mathematically is possible, right?
Mark, to that point, that historically, that's what we have done. The overwhelming majority of all of our large interceptor sewers, the Pigeon Creeks, everything east of Middle Road was put in at the city's expense years and a lot of forethought ahead of time and sat. I mean, there's still portions of it that run through where Quad City Bank and Trust is going, for example. That sewer has been in the ground for, I think, 30+ years, and it still doesn't have anybody connected to it. That has been how we're doing, or how we have done it, and not necessarily what we are proposing to do going forward.
Thoughts here, Greg?
Thank you, Your Honor. Jason, just help me understand a little bit. What you're saying is, if we go down this road, for a couple of years, the city's got to figure out how to pay the sewer debt.
Right.
However that takes, however long it takes to get houses built or townhomes built, the city's got to be able to pay that principal and interest.
Right.
The new legislation that was passed talks about problems with cities having general funds in excess of 35%. And you've talked about a way of handling that is to encumber funds above 35%.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that for the swimming pool, the city, in essence, fronted some of the costs out of the general fund and waited or is waiting or has waited to recoup all of the contributions from the various parties that were coming in over time.
Right.
Would it be possible for the city to charge all of the costs associated with this extension to this development with the expectation that the city would front the costs by encumbering general fund to the extent necessary, and as development occurs, those dollars come in? Doing it in that way, would that minimize the rate increase to existing users?
That would certainly be one way to attack it, to minimize the rate increase. I'm not sure the general fund has the capacity to take on that big of a price tag.
15 million, probably not. A
But-
couple of years worth of principal and interest, I don't know. It's
Right.
for you and the advisors to talk about.
Yep, I understand what you're saying. I think there's certainly, as we've talked through budget, there's a few $1 million of kind of flexible fund balance within the general fund. And if it means front loading some of that debt service, to your point, to minimize that impact, I think that's something that council could wrestle with.
Some of that is an accounting function, right? You're moving it from one fund to the other and charging it back.
Right.
Good.
Mark, so you kind of talked, we've got two separate pieces, right? We've got annexation and the investment in the sewer. What does annexation look like without an investment in the sewer, with us investing as a city on the front end? And what does that look like?
So if we were to annex but not pay for the sewer, then we have to provide services as a city. So if we annex land, we've got to provide services. So if they're gonna build homes, there's gonna have to be a sewer somehow. I think that was the question that was just asked, is do you have some scenario where a developer pays 100% of the sewer costs? I guess that's a possibility. I don't know that it's a likely possibility. Is that the question you asked?
Again, just trying to understand, so we can't annex without spending $15 million for a sewer, or break it into maybe smaller annexations where we go from a direction where we have existing sewer to not front $15 million of the people's money
Yeah, so.
to develop an area and try to get private money in first.
Right, so we looked at some scenarios related to that, like trying to build closer to Valley Drive where we can connect to, and then build up from there. There might be some short-term costs that you could be saved for that. The problem is putting the annexation together when you have willing participants that want to be annexed, willing landowners and willing developers. To make that annexation, if you just do a piece down the south, make it make sense for the guy up north who's waiting to buy ground and waiting to move on a property. That may time that person out And then you maybe have, then that just becomes county development, which is a slide we have prepared for you. But so there's some chessboard here with annexation where you have to do it probably in a way that's meaningful for your infrastructure to physically work. And theoretically, could you do, the last mile and then do the next mile and do the next mile and then do the next mile and go north? You could do it in theory, but the annexation process probably wouldn't work as far as bringing a coalition of willing landowners together that are matched with a developer that makes that project really work in reality.
And,
that would be difficult.
And the sewer is all flowing south towards Valley Drive and then west. So you can't have, you have to, the development to the north, if it wasn't built, that development would have to wait. And we're seeing, remember, there's a school here now. There's a school farther west on Forest Grove. There's a possible future school right here. So we kind of believe there'll be a lot of attractability towards that area. So the only way to get up there is building the whole sewer. And then, of course, multiple landowners are involved. So you have to get them all together at once. Once you lose that kind of critical mass, it becomes very difficult from the annexation process.
Also to keep
There's a little bit
keep it
of a
voluntary.
timeline on that now.
Yeah.
And Brent, tell us a little bit about cost of sewer, how that might change if you were to piecemeal it.
Yeah, to Taylor's point, it's a little hard to see on that map, but you got to think that obviously as you go downstream, your pipe gets bigger. So if we have to start at PV ready mix is the manhole basically that we would be connecting and heading east there. That's your largest sewer that you're going to be bringing up. You have to bring up probably 60% of the cost of sewer just to even get to the annexation area. And then at that point, you've got smaller trunk sewers that can feed north. If you're already at 60 to 70% of your overall project cost, you're never going to be able to do it cheaper than to do it now and not try to wait and potentially, to Taylor's point, incent those properties that are looking further north. To be able to piecemeal it really would not make financial sense.
Thank you.
And again, trying to bring a voluntary annexation means we need 80% landowners by weight. And so you kind of have to build the map out to bring that forward to the state. And so if you kind of cleave off, you're kind of playing with your denominator, you start cleaving off pieces and then wait and hope that you can get to that voluntary piece again as you move north, the math gets hard.
And in the state of Iowa, if there's 100% voluntary annexations in the 80-20, but in either scenario, you can't have an island of the city in the middle of nowhere. So once that's not a possibility. So you have it always contiguous to your current boundary. So it's a lot of connecting different properties and property owners and in that way.
Greg?
Your Honor, trying to build on Councilmember Flaherty's concern, I thought this was all started when a developer came to us and said, hey, I've got a problem with the county. If I could get into the city, I could build something that would be more marketable than what I can build under the county regulations. So there was some developer interest is the right word in trying to make this work. The concern is what happens if houses don't get built? What happens if we don't get private money into the mix? To me, this is the kind of thing that a development agreement might be suitable for. And I don't know to what extent anybody has talked to anybody about that. But a development agreement between the city and developers trying to lay out how we're going to do this and how we're going to fund it might be helpful in trying to get that piece of it resolved. I personally sympathize and understand the concern that Councilmember Sesher raised about, we got to do something citywide, but how much do we have to do citywide? And right now, because we don't know how many houses are getting built or when houses are getting built or the valuation of the houses that are getting built, we're sort of shooting in the dark.
Yeah, and I think part of that is gonna be a negotiation that we'll direct staff to have if we get to that point today. We're kind of litmus testing the idea of annexation tonight, and I hope that, you know, we come out of this with that's based upon the opportunity costs that you might get to right now, can be very positive for the city, then staff go do your thing.
One of the things that we thought about as we talked about this as a team was, let's just take it off the map. Let's just not do it. What's the cost of inaction? I think Shakespeare has a quote about this. So there is still development that would likely occur. There is still development that would likely occur in the county. Now, it might be large lot development, it might be septic development, it would probably be all private roads, but it would be right on our border. But we think, in our talks with our partners at the county, that they would eventually, if we said, hey, Bettendorf's out on this deal, there would be some type of development there, because you have so much attraction to the parochial school, to the Pleasant Valley school system, to the natural road construction that's already available, the natural transportation network that's already available, and the nearness to Bettendorf in general. You'd have something there. We don't get to not service it, even though it's not in Bettendorf. We still have to service it from a fire perspective, and probably from lesser degree, a backup perspective from police. So there's no free lunch. There's no getting away from it. It still happens. So maybe we're okay with that, and if that's where the group goes, but I would counter that. What has happened when we have those subdivisions develop directly on our edge, that put in their own roads, put in their own septic, and then 20 years from now, those roads and septic that are built to a private standard, not to our standard, start to fail, they come to us for solutions. And we have been roped into helping them, maybe, in recent years. And I think that is something to think about as a cost. Even though we're not taking the cost, that cost might still be sitting out there, waiting for us someday down the road.
Yeah, Mark, that's a very real point. You know, we've had discussions with you all lately on private roads policy and potential for those. You know, if you remember the Tanglewood sewer project that we did just a couple years ago, that was I believe one of the annexed, probably the 70s annexation that was brought in. They were on an island and they've been on septic forever. And guess what happened? Those septics eventually started failing. They came to us. We put the sewer in at our cost. They paid for their connections, but we put the sewer in. So obviously on a much smaller scale, but that's exactly what we did.
And the county recently, because of, there's a lot of, all development in Pleasant Valley, outside the city, they're on septic, there's no sewer available. But these houses are getting larger, there's more bedrooms, more discharge to these septic systems, and they're failing at a higher rate. Some of that has to do with the amount of land available on each lot compared to the structure. They increased, the health department through the DNR increased the size, minimum size of lots in the county for single family. If you're on a septic system and maybe Iowa American Water, it's 1.5 acres. If you're on both a septic system and a well, you're at 2 acres minimum. So that is the law in Scott County, and that's what the future would be if we weren't to annex.
The county doesn't take any roads anymore. So the roads are all private now, so those wouldn't be county-maintained roads. Should we go back one or two? Oh,
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. Maybe I should expand on my concern. I have a lot of residents in my ward that are living in $200,000-$300,000 houses, and it's hard to justify to them that, oh, we need to increase your sewer so that somebody can go out here on the east part of town and build a $750,000 $1 million house, and I need you to subsidize it. Or in a lot of cases, as Mark knows, we have a lot of rentals down in the first ward. A lot of these guys are renting because they can't afford to buy a house. And yet we're going to say, oh, we're going to increase your sewer rate so that somebody else can build a $750,000 house out here. It doesn't sit well with these voters.
Well, remember, you're lowering their taxes because you're getting general fund payments through general tax collection on property taxes from other people that aren't here now, that reduces the amount that we all pay that are here now. So remember the second part of that equation, I think. I totally understand your
Well, that's
position.
true, but for those renters, they're not paying taxes anyhow, and their landlord is not gonna reduce their rent when their taxes go down.
Sure.
We've been there.
Something I could add just to keep in mind, it's an upcoming project, so something we're not there to yet. But on the flip side of that argument, we have $30 million in I&I projects that are on the books that we know we have to do. They're gonna be DNR. All of those projects are essentially below central. So we will be, the flip side then, the rest of our ratepayers will be subsidizing those $30 million in projects that they see no benefit for whatsoever either. So we kind of have to see it both ways. So I agree with that, but on a much larger scale, we've got that coming down the road that all the new homes and that valuation are gonna be paying to replace all those sewers in that first ward and bottom part of third ward.
And I think that point is that we actually saw some rate relief by adding users to this system when you look at long-term costs to be paid for the system. So people's rates are going to go up for sewer.
I think if you look on page 13 of the Baker Tilly,
Yep.
it really does, it shows the rates under scenario 1, which is no annexation, but take care of those projects that Brent mentioned. Put that cost on everybody. Scenario 2, if you just socialize all of those costs to everybody, but do the annexation. And then scenario 3 is where the district comes into play, and that's where the rate is the lowest. So I think that page 13 is kind of an interesting chart on that point.
Spreading maintenance costs across more users of the system brings down the costs. I'm looking at Jason, right, for those users. So it's not your rates are going up because of annexation or not. Rates are going up because there's deferred maintenance and ongoing costs. How we share those costs could impact your rate and actually be lower if we actually have more users elsewhere on the system. Maybe we go back to the new tax law. We haven't talked about that one yet specifically, but let's talk about the new tax law, because I think it kind of goes into some of these concerns of how we pay for this, what happens, how does it work. This is really Jason, Jeff, Decker, all know this way better than I do. I would just remind you that there's actually 2 new tax laws. We did a new tax law in 2023, and because we liked it so much, we did another one in 2026. Thank you very much. And so Jason has put some slides together to kind of explain those. The first one consolidated things in the general fund. The second one brought in this 2% cap. But Jason, do you want us to go to that graphic and try and walk through that?
Yeah, I think now's a good time to pull those up. As you know, we've kind of been waiting on having this discussion until the legislature came to its conclusion this year. Some of the proposed property tax bills would have really complicated this, to say the least. A 2% hard cap on all levy rates would have, made doing what we do today difficult, let alone taking on more. But I wanted to put up these 2 charts side by side to show how the resulting legislation this year doesn't really change much for us, too much. On the left-hand side, you'll see HF 718 from 2023. You're all familiar with this chart in one way or another, but basically, under HF 718, as the general fund levy rate was forced downward by a growth in valuation, we were making up for that with our trust and agency levy rates and those other couple of levy rates that are available to us to basically keep our levy rate level and continue to see increased tax dollar revenue. And that's represented here going out into the future. I will say this is kind of more of an example than, specific numbers here, but it is representative of our growth, our levy rates. The very top line in each chart, the purple line at the top represents tax dollars. And for our example purposes here, those are increasing at 4% a year. So despite the 2% cap, if we move over to the right-hand side chart, we can achieve the same dollars each year through two of those mechanisms: new growth and increasing those levy rates in the other areas, the trust and agency levy rates, et cetera. Obviously, the more new growth you have, the less you have to increase those rates. And you can see the orange line in the middle represents the total operating levy rate. It bounces around, but basically remains flat. I will say in FY '28 on the right-hand side, you see it tick up, and that's just due to a sharp decrease in valuation. The new homestead tax credit, that goes from today, $4,850, it goes up to $20,000 per property, will erase about $150 million of taxable property value in Bettendorf alone. So the levy rate adjusts because of that, but we're not taking any more dollars. The total tax dollars line stays the same. The levy rate just moves with the valuation. Then importantly, the top lighter green section of this is not actual tax dollars or tax levy rates taxed today. It represents the capacity we have in those other levy rates for additional taxes in the future, and that's equal to about $4 million. You can see it's ticking downwards as we use up a little bit more of it each year, but again, that's offset by growth. So the more growth we get, the less of that capacity we have to use. If you kind of follow it across, we're using about 10 cents of that capacity each year in this case. This importantly does not consider annexation. This is just our normal growth pattern so far. So given that rate of usage, you've got probably 10 to 15 years of capacity within those levy rates alone, not to mention growth over and above our conservative estimates here. So the legislation was certainly a major concern for us in budget. You'll all remember that. The end result through our work and the work of cities around the state and the League of Cities is not too terrible for Bettendorf. It will be very terrible for cities that are currently at 810 and are not growing because they don't have either one of those levers that we have. So having the ability to grow and having that levy rate capacity unique to Bettendorf is really positive for us. And I think the legislation actually strengthens the case for annexation by strengthening the value of growth. How'd I do?
Good job. Solid B.
Go back to the tax bill slide and maybe we'll walk through. There you go.
Is the question then, if you add growth, does that I think it was 856, does that possibly change if you have growth? Does that rate possibly change?
Right. The more we grow, the less that rate would.
I think in the out year was like $8.56.
Yeah,
It could be
it would
less
be
if you
lower
add
than
growth.
that if you had growth.
I'm thinking.
This was the one we really wanted to hold off and do the presentation until we had this information. So if there's other questions, we're happy to talk through this one. It's interesting in a way that I don't know that they thought about this, that they're actually incentivizing growth from just from a property tax law standpoint. Again, our project came to us before this law. It's not a response to the law.
Right. But now we know some of the outgrowth of the law that Jason's explained to us, that this hasn't changed. In fact, it's probably strengthened your position on growth. If we decide not to annex and not grow, then we'll all be paying more for the same services.
Right.
Without the help of one of the two levers you talked about, meaning it won't be 15 years for those levies to be eaten up. It'll be more immediate.
Right.
Okay.
And there is, new growth can be done within a city. You don't have to annex to get growth.
Well, of course.
But then you got to be really good at new growth. You got to have places to do it. And we've talked about some of that has been chewed up a little bit.
This is the knock down the house, put up a different house
Yeah,
argument.
yeah.
Buy two
Yeah.
lots,
Timely redevelopment.
put up
is-
a
Yes,
house.
sir. Timely redevelopment is the term of art, and that also takes work and infrastructure costs. It's not just free either.
Right. Any other questions here or comments, thoughts? Nick?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. As I think more about it of, adding new homes and continuing to grow, I think there's a bigger challenge that we face as a state, right? Because we're not really growing, right? I mean, people are leaving. We sit in a very fortunate position, but also the question is like, where are the people are gonna come from that wanna fill these houses?
I've been asking myself that since I was looking at houses at 4 or 5 years old, but it's happening. And these guys have got the product and they're the ones telling you, I can sell it. I need more product.
I agree with that, and I understand, we've seen that forever, but at what point does the music stop? And who's left holding the bag at that point? Again, I'm not anti-annexation and growth and all that, I believe it's all good, but, you know.
That's part of the questions in the philosophy, I think, that Mark was getting at.
Yeah, I mean, does council have a feeling like, we're willing to go this far, but not that far? That's your decision to make. What we've tried to do is analyze in context, the decision that's specifically to this piece. The larger crystal ball, I don't have. I don't know the answer to that. We were responding to a market, really, right, as a city, and the market's coming to us. Again, this was externally started, not internally started. The city didn't go out and say, we want to annex. It started the other way around.
But we did work for years on getting sorry, Chris, on getting an annexation policy, and even council went further than staff recommended, knowing that we're continuing to grow and knowing that growth is the only mechanism by which we stay healthy and keep the taxes as low as possible for the great services you all provide. So we had that conceptually there for you. And then we put together the map that said, this is where we go first, 1A, then there's a 1B, and stay away from north of 80 at this point in time because it costs more to put it together.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering the process of the comprehensive land use plan, staff was pretty vocal about trying to limit our growth area north and west. We thought that's expensive.
Specifically west.
Yep. We thought that was expensive. We thought there were sewerability connection issues there.
I thought there were political issues that others didn't think there were.
Yeah. So I remember some of those conversations, and certainly when now if an annexation proposal was coming in that area, without doing a full analysis, I'm probably a no on that one. This is not that. This is different than that. The context is different. The geography is different. The services are different. The road network is different. And we're looking at all those things when we bring you our analysis. The decision is yours to make. 100% agree with that. No problem whatsoever. But that's why I would say not annexation all the time at all cost. Absolutely not. This annexation, I think, checks boxes if you go through our policy and look at the context.
Greg?
Thank you, Your Honor. It's pretty obvious to me that staff would really like us to go forward on this. And I generally would lean into staff's recommendation. But I have discomfort at 3 different pressure points. And I want to know if other members of the council have those same discomforts. The first on the Grun and Grun study, where they simply have absolute numbers for revenue and expenditure. When we know that we have differences in revenue and expenditure each year, makes that report hard for me to fully accept. It would seem that if they've got the numbers and they've got the spreadsheets, they could adjust the numbers for a 2% growth as is allowed by law and could adjust the expenditures to 4%. We just heard the chart say we need 4% revenue growth. I'm assuming we need 4% revenue growth because we're going to have 4% expenditure growth. So if we could adjust the expenses by increasing them 4% a year, I think I get a more comfortable net number than what we've been presented so far. Niggly point, they put in a number for a vacuum, but they didn't put in a number for a replacement vac. They put in a number for a dump truck. They didn't put in a number for a replacement. Again, 7 years out, 8 years out, if the vac truck doubled between the time we bought it last time and the time we're buying it now, you could plug that in. Get us a more accurate number of what our growth, what the revenue good to the city is. That makes it much more sellable to the people that I talk to, and I'm much more comfortable selling it to the people that I talk to if I am comfortable that the numbers truly reflect what our revenues and expenditures are going to get. As I said before, Your Honor, I have a council member Flaherty's concern. How do we ensure that we get some private sector dollars in on this as well? And I think a development agreement of some sort with the property owners out there would be helpful. I don't know how it gets put together. I don't know what the commitments are, but I think that's helpful, again, in explaining why it is the city is marching down this road. And then lastly, Your Honor, I have no idea whether anybody on the council would even consider what I suggested about encumbering some general fund monies and doing fund transfers back and forth, but it would have the effect of placing more of the burden on the area that's being developed and less of a burden on the area outside of the area being developed, while actually getting it done, which is you need the cash, you're gonna have to come up with the cash, let's figure out a way to do that. Your Honor, those are the three things that I had concerns about. I'm hoping that over the next couple of weeks or months, staff can look at those things. But if, as before, if I'm the only guy out here on this stuff, then, let's move forward and we'll go forward on it.
Do we have a better explanation? Go ahead, Jeff. My thought is on why there weren't assumptions built in. I thought Gruen and Gruen had the reason. Maybe it's a wrong reason, but it was a reason.
So some of it, so I think these are great points to be raised. Some of it was simply timing. Remember when we were working on this 2024, 2025, don't quote me on the year, we were having them analyze a potential tax law change that did not come to effect. So hard to fault them because they didn't have this one, and then we didn't ask them to do a new analysis. That we can, they like to be paid, so I'm sure we could ask them to do a new analysis that looks at the new tax law specifically and runs the numbers. They just weren't able to do that because there was no tax law at the time when they were under contract with us.
Fair enough.
Should council ask us to do that? We could definitely do it. As far as the constant dollars piece of that, they explained their methodology, that some of this would be a departure from their methodology, but we could still ask them if they would be willing to do it. Again, they're in the business of doing these type of reports, so perhaps they would. But certainly when it comes to analyzing the new tax law, they didn't have that information to be analyzed. They tried to do it looking at the old tax law that never got passed. We could ask them to do it under the new one.
Anything else on that, Jeff, study? And then Jeff, you had something?
On the Gruen and Gruen study, I think their methodology is sound for the product that we asked them for. I would just say, I think what gives me comfort is one, even with their methodology, which only considered some limited revenue sources, revenue was more than 2 times projected expenditures. So that gives, I think there's some cushion there if they're wrong on any point. And 2, I think what we've shown after understanding the new property tax bill is we will be able to better match property tax revenue to expenditures than what we could have under a hard 2% cap that was proposed early on in the session.
But, Your Honor, to the point, I think we can ask them if the council's willing to do that, or we can get an analysis done maybe with Baker Tilly, but to take your point.
Just to spray you,
Yeah.
you throw a couple of changes in the cells. And
Yeah, I agree. I think we can do that. I think we can do that to at least show you what you're asking.
Yeah.
I was gonna jump in and ask if we could do that, because if the 6% has been that way for the last couple of years, I'm surprised they just didn't grab that.
Me too. Would you rather it be 6% or 4%? I think
Yeah,
4% is what you just presented, but 6% is what you presented during budget time.
Yeah, historically for
Don't
the last
believe him, for God's sake.
for the last several years, our actual property tax dollar revenue has increased between 4 and 5%. I landed on 4% as an example for the presentation.
I mean, on the expenditure side, Jason, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
At budget, it was 6%. Now, I'm assuming 4% expenditures because you said 4%. If 6% is the better number, please, let's use 6%.
Absolutely. It's important to remember there's other revenue sources that are kind of offsetting the property taxes. So, but I think to the point, we can take a look at it, maybe even internally, and see if we can't get you a better level of comfort.
I would note that they were conservative on their revenues. For example, no building permit revenue at all are included in the report. So, which is on a $1 million or $2 million home is a significant number, but they left all those out, just to be really tight with their estimations.
And if I recall, they only used the actual general fund levy rate of 757.
That's right.
Not the combined operating levy rate of obviously closer to 780, I think, in the year that they looked at. So.
Yep.
Might want to have them enter those numbers too if we're going to run some more reports. Let's get the best number we can get based on the actual information.
And we now know what's happened to us. I mean, we were speculating. Now we actually know.
Anybody else want to be heard on those three topics? Obviously, development agreement is a possibility. I think what staff was looking for today is, are you open to the annexation? If you're open to the annexation, then I think they feel directed that they're now gonna go work on it. And if you tell them, hey, you can take these permits, it's work it out. With development agreement, we haven't spent a lot of time with it because this is where you got us. Am I reading the room?
That's correct, Your Honor. We've worked on this. We've done some heartfelt analysis. We think we have a good understanding of what the impacts would be. Obviously, to Mr. Jagger's point, we are positive on it as staff. We are also open-hearted and open-minded. I think we need to come back to you with some resolutions now, like a resolution to process the applications, a resolution to enter to or negotiate a development agreement. Those type of things need to happen because we're at the, I'm not comfortable doing that without those resolutions any farther.
Well, and I think the other point, and there was a schedule someplace in here that the council needs to know, even if you said, let's do it, if you said tonight, let's do it.
Katie, can you put the schedule up?
The implication of how long this takes is pretty significant. And so we've got landowners or property owners that have interest to move forward.
And expiring options on ground, it sounds like.
And so that's going to be the whole point about a development agreement. But just to give you the perspective of how long this is going to take, we think that's important for you to know too.
What's the expiring time on grant?
That's not our.
The best one to explain this slide, but just to build the sewer, about 2.5 years?
About 2.5 years, yep.
That's if we decided everything was good.
Assuming that the biggest portion in there is gonna be land acquisition, is gonna be easements to acquire all those. So that you can see there's 18 months worth of design. The design's probably 9 months out of that. A good chunk of it's the easement acquisition. Now, we can have some, if we're moving forward, you give us to go ahead to do this, everything's looking well. We can get some concurrent construction started at some point. We've talked to the developers about that. We have enough depth through there to let them start grading, start some of their work, and try to time it out right. But it's a process, there's no doubt.
What are your thoughts, folks? Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, John's head's going to explode when I ask this question, but just from a hypothetical standpoint, and I think we've had some history of this in the community and surrounding communities, we have a 100-acre park that already is very close to sewer and roads and access. Is there a potential to discuss a land swap? Or is there area here that might make a better park that reduces our investment in a sewer, and we can take an area that's more flat and where we're already seeing development? What does that possibly look like?
I don't think we've
got a lot of floodplain in that park.
I mean, it's a very non-traditional thought, but I mean, we're having a discussion, so.
I think it's fair. My first reaction is there's a lot of floodplain in Forest Grove Park, and that makes me nervous. I don't know if you can throw the floodplain map up, but my first thought is we got some floodplain issues in Forest Grove Park, and I'd really want to think about that before I start making deals. That's where my first thought went.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yeah, Jay, Jeff.
My previous point and the point Councilmember Flaherty just made. A couple things to contemplate is the urban renewal laws. So if we were to consider a land swap, for example, we would have to, one, go out for an RFP and see what sort of bidders we would get on it, and/or we would have to do a development agreement exclusively with a developer who has something in which we could horse trade or barter with, and we'd have to do it under a development agreement term. The other suggestion was more of a rhetorical question for Councilor Curran. The notion of a development agreement is a very savvy approach to this. My rhetorical question is, when tying a development agreement to the use of incremental tax revenues for construction of infrastructure, would we likely need to create an urban renewal plan around this area in order to achieve the development agreement and that outcome? And again, it's rhetorical, but we likely, I would assume, have to create an urban renewal plan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm hesitant to talk too much about any specifics of a development agreement. I think what I take from this discussion is a good one from, I think, a lot of the council members, which is that we want to try to put, have skin in the game for the benefiting property owners and developers, and try to figure out a fair way to do that. And I think that that's the best outcome that I would like to take from this, as well as, Connor's, I think, good outside the box observation, but also something that I don't know that we need to really flesh out here tonight. But I think, from my seat in the House, I not to wrap it up here, but I think what Connor, or what Mark and Taylor tried to do here is to get a conversation with council, and I feel like we got that. And so I for one, am coming out of this meeting with a lot of good information and feeling, so.
Do we feel like we want council to continue, or council? Does council feel like we want staff to continue working this to the next phase, bring those resolutions before you so that you can direct them formally at a meeting to get this thing moving? Greg?
Just to follow up for Chris and for Jeff, the annexation process is a lot of paperwork. And in that paperwork is the schedule of how the city is going to provide services to the area. One of the things might be an agreement with the developer that would be a part of the annexation package, as opposed to simply an urban renewal development agreement. It'd be something to look at.
Yeah, excellent point. Certainly, with an 80-20 voluntary annexation, we need to be able to tell the city development board how we are going to provide services. So, yep, that's a good point.
All right, do we feel comfortable that we're directing them to keep moving?
Wait a minute, explain the urban renewal thing to me again, Jeff. As far as what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Should have kept your mouth shut. You've not listened well, young Skywalker.
The legal question is whether you can do an urban renewal district outside the corporate city limits of the city.
About 4 legal questions here.
Oh, Greg.
Okay, wait, this had to tie in with the Forest Grove thing? Is that correct?
Lisa, I can talk to you offline about it.
Okay, which that is, to me, is not an option, but okay, go ahead, we'll talk after.
Greg?
Your Honor, and again, I didn't hear anything, but I would like to at least understand what would happen if we were to take a chunk of general fund money and encumber it towards this purpose, and how that would affect the rates. Because I agree with Councilmember Sesher, rates are an issue. I'm less inclined on the I&I argument, but I'm not gonna fight the argument here. I'd really just like to see where the numbers are.
I think that's reasonable. So we do have some work to do, but did you get out of the discussion what you had hoped?
I did. I hope council did, honestly. My concern tonight was that people were heard, people were able to ask questions, staff gave their best answer, and if we didn't have answers, we said we didn't have answers. So I feel great about tonight's meeting. I hope you all do as well. I really appreciate you, and thank you.
You did a really good job. A lot of hard work went into this thing, and so much appreciated.
Taylor. Okay. And all the department heads. Jeff, Jason, any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate the work that the staff has done, and I echo Councilor Curran's thoughts. I'm very optimistic and positive about the conversation. We appreciate you all interjecting, so thank you.
Anybody else? Brent, Chiefs? Decker?
Your Honor, I just would ask, we've got these 3, what I call the really salient points. Does any other council member have anything else that these three, perhaps 4 points, if I had the general fund dollars in there. Anything else that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, Connor?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thanks, Decker. To kind of echo Jerry's point, and as we're redoing the numbers, I'd love to see more of just the impact of what we truly think we're going to see as that area grows. So from a public works standpoint, what more investments are we going to have to make in people and equipment? Just so we aren't building a lot of cost and that we're not covering that comes back. And now we're trying to figure this out 20 years from now, and it's become a white elephant because it didn't develop the way it is. So I think it's important to see more numbers and really understand the long-term and short-term impacts to our residents.
Jason, is there more to putting that together than is already in the report? Is there a way
Yeah,
to?
so when doing the research for Gruner Green, all the department heads were contacted about
This is my
future
point.
needs.
I'm trying to figure
So
out.
from a public works standpoint, Brian had mentioned, and actually we talked about this the other day in our staff meeting, we still have, specifically from really the biggest impact would be solid waste. So we do still have capacity in our existing routes and our existing equipment to add to that. Brian said at full build out, he would estimate that point may require an additional route for just that area, but you would be looking 20 years down the road. The streets aspect is very simple. They're brand new. You're going to have a 30 to 50 year lifespan on all those. But yes, the people and equipment was factored into the Gruner and Grun.
Right, and we did not do an enterprise fund analysis because the enterprise fund, basically you have captured customers. You can't buy sewer from somebody else. We can, do an enterprise fund analysis, I suppose. What we did do was look at the revenues in the Public Works Department that are not enterprise fund related, and that's mainly that road use tax fund, because that is just a function of more, maybe not just.
More population.
More population equals more road use tax fund. I think 1,000 people get you, I don't know, $100,000 something. It's in the report. So just to be clear, so that I know what I'm asking for, we're talking about updating this study, which is mainly general fund focused, a little bit of public works funding, but not doing an enterprise fund analysis, which is a bigger picture, bigger dog that, to me, probably not necessary, because the enterprise funds work off users, and you don't get to buy sewer from somebody else once you're on our sewer. It's not Coke versus Pepsi. So.
I think thank you, Your Honor. The other question on that, Brent, so you say 20 years, does that assume the rest of, the existing 485 lots, right, on our existing routes where we say we have capacity? Let's say those begin to fill, does that then shrink our timeline to 10 years that we need to?
No, because the majority of those lots, a good chunk, we're already driving by them now.
Okay.
You might be picking up every third lot or every fifth lot, but you're making passes through those areas because they have roads already on them.
Very good, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah,
Connor.
So go ahead, Jerry.
No, go ahead.
And so again, I guess to clarify, maybe it'd be helpful to see a high and low, a worst case scenario, best case scenario. I'm looking at examples of what we've seen for the garbage packers and we've seen for our fire trucks, where I want to make sure we're being thoughtful of, if we're planning for a $400,000 piece of equipment and it suddenly jumps up to $2 million, if that happens and continues to happen, are we covered for it? At least so we know what risk we're making a gamble on, because they're probably not going to go down.
They're not gonna go down, I don't think,
That's for sure. Jerry, do you have something else?
No.
Okay. Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Your Honor.
Yeah.
As I was thinking about fire trucks, we mentioned the new fire station. That would be part of this. I think the estimates call for a $7.5 million fire station as the baseline. I don't know what kind of fire station we're going to build for $7.5 million.
I think the chief was out of his mind when he was doing that. Don't pay attention to him.
But if
This
you're
is late in the evening,
if you're calculating 7 years down the road, what's worst case scenario, right? I mean, can we do it cheaper? Yeah, absolutely. Today, can we do it cheaper? But if it takes us 7 years to get that done, hopefully it doesn't. But what are costs, to your point of projecting? That's where my vision was going with it.
Oh, right, Chief, I think you misunderstood.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think 7.5 is way light
Oh, do you?
on cost of a
But
building.
we're looking at one general, like just one engine company, maybe a rescue in there. We don't need 4 bays,
So,
we don't need a district
smaller
chief in there, smaller scale.
Okay.
Correct, more of a, residential fire station.
When it comes time to build the new station, you're gonna end up building it for more than this subdivision. So a larger building that handles more of the city can easily be explained and justified to the users of the system. 7.5, if that's your best number, I'm cool with 7.5. I'll bet Nick is cool with 7.5. We just all know that a station that's gonna serve more than this area is gonna cost more than that number.
Yes and no, I guess I would say, because you try to put your fire stations within a 5-6 minute response time, so you have smaller buildings versus a police station where you're putting everybody in one building, if that makes sense. You would rather want to have, smaller buildings with quicker response times to those areas.
Yeah, if you say we need a one-bay station, I'm gonna listen to your expertise, sure.
No,
I think-
It's gonna be more than one, but.
And I do think we started this discussion with the legislature this year on that fire district levy, because that, for everybody across the state who are now gonna be shrunk on all their other revenues, I think the state's gonna have to think about the possibility that that's gonna have to change. And I think there's an idea that it's more, if there's an urban area that it's serving, that should be different than a fire district that's rural in nature. That the levy, there should be some play there. And then finally, the entire area of Stony Creek, which we serve today, there's nothing in the law that says we have to serve that district and that area. And there's nothing that we couldn't do a private agreement with them to get more dollars. If we're gonna have to be responding there, I think we're gonna have to get creative about that perspective. Those guys moved there with the intention that they thought somebody would take care of them. I think that's naive, and I think for the value that they have and pay, that we should be looking at that very creatively.
For sure. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for the good work. Wonderful job on our discussion. Let's take a look. Is there any other item to be added by council for tomorrow night? I do not have one. And I know Jerry wanted to ask a question about the pool, an update on the pool and its opening. John?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. So we informed the council during the startup this year, there was a small leak found in one of the pools in the Lazy River. That has been identified, exposed, and fixed, and now it'll be poured back tomorrow, so you might see some concrete trucks there. They did not have to miss a single day of operations, so everything went really well. The YMCA handled that quite quickly and efficiently.
And under warranty.
And all under warranty. None of that is coming out of the city. So I actually just provided the city administrator a quick update on that after another council member asked earlier today. So I'm sure that'll get sent out to the council with some photos and information tomorrow morning.
Thank you, sir.
And my other part of the question is, normally on construction projects, just prior to the 1-year expiration of the 1-year warranty, the owner and the contractor do a walkthrough inspection. And so my question is, did we do that, or are we doing that? And I know there are several council members that would like a copy of that report once it's done.
Brett?
Yeah, so we did this actually kind of in 3 pieces. Jerry, I reached out when you asked me before the meeting and just texted Brian Schmidt about it. So I did a walkthrough with Dave Merritt, my chief construction inspector, and GCI last week on all of the site work. So that's all the concrete, the railings, everything. We did that, created a punch list. There's a few items that need seal, a little replacing. And then between Brian, John, Taylor at the Y, and Josh Whitson, they did basically 2 separate walks. One was on just a general scoping for the preventative maintenance plan, and then the other was more of a warranty walk, and that coincided with the opening, which is where the break was found. I don't know if there's a formal report from that piece. I can send you the piece that we have from the concrete that needs to be sealed and replaced.
Nick?
Thank you, Your Honor. On this topic, what is the end date of the warranty specifically?
So we had 2 separate warranties. May 26th was the last warranty. So that was for the pool side. We have already extended past the 1-year warranty for the ice side because that was open the fall before.
I got it. And do we have an option for an extended warranty?
We do not. Nope. So we do, building projects are a standard 1-year warranty. Roadway, we do 4-year warranties, but it's a lot cheaper. Quite frankly, the cost, we did look into that cost originally, and it was several hundreds of thousands of dollars to extend their initial warranty.
And I guess the last thought on this is, I get it, stuff happens, right? You have all sorts of moving parts and pieces to a project of this size and scope. Is there any concern, should we be looking at any reliability studies now to understand where do we have other soft spots that we might not be aware of today? I don't know how in-depth the warranty walk goes, if you're more surface level or.
It's surface level, yeah. So for example, the break that was found was on a recirc line under one of the concrete slabs. Other than if you're getting into radar testing or things like that, you're gonna have trouble identifying that. Everything else is visual. It can be seen right there. I don't think any of us here, including John, could probably talk in a whole lot of detail. That might be a better question for, say, Mike Arnold, our building maintenance manager, and maybe Brian to circle back and talk about that.
Yeah, the other thing, this is, as a lot of you know about swimming pools here, even in the city of Bettendorf, it's not unique to us. I know Whitewater Junction had a problem this year. City of Omaha didn't open 5 of their 11 pools in the first weekend. It's just, I think the nature of pools, they'll run into, issues. The preventative maintenance the YMCA has done, in my walkthrough with them personally, I was really impressed. Of the certified pool operators I've known in my career, the YMCA employee is a really, really talented one. And they're working towards formalizing their standard operating procedures to make sure anyone could plug and play and keep the pool up at a high level. So I think you're always going to have issues with pools. There's a reason municipalities are, try to oftentimes get them off their books because they have exposure and liabilities there. But as far as ours goes, I've been impressed with what the YMCA has done to prevent any maintenance in the future.
Thank you.
All right. All right, if there's nothing further, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Good work, people. 7 o'clock.